Hello, and welcome to this National MS Education Awareness Month program hosted by MS Focus, the Multiple Sclerosis Foundation. This program is made possible with support from Mylan, Genentech, Bristol-Myers Squibb, Biogen, EMD Serono, Novartis, Sanofi Genzyme, and Janssen Neuroscience, a Johnson & Johnson company. I'm your host, Casey Minnis, Director of Communications for MS Focus, and I'm joined by Cherie Binns, who will be talking about our theme for National MS Education Awareness Month, I'm Visible. The I'm Visible theme encourages everyone to be visible for the MS cause. Now, let me introduce our speaker. Cherie Binns is an MS-certified nurse who herself has MS. She is a friend of the Multiple Sclerosis Foundation, often writing and speaking on our behalf, and I'll let Cherie tell you a little bit more about herself as she begins her presentation. Cherie, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Casey, and welcome to everyone who is joining us on this webinar. I'm Visible is a topic that resonates with me because I have learned to be more visible on my own behalf and on behalf of people who have MS. And a lot of that comes out of really understanding how MS is affecting each of us individually and building on that and learning to overcome some of the difficulties that MS might present to each of us as individuals. So that said, let me just quickly preface with a little bit about my MS journey. I was first hospitalized for what we now know was probably my first major MS event when I was 23 years old. I was not diagnosed until the age of 42, and at that point there was only one medication available and a lottery for it, so I was not given the medication. 6 years later, by the time I was approaching 50, I was using one or two canes and had become pretty much scooter dependent. So what I'm going to do is to sort of take you on a little journey of lifestyle changes that I've identified and how they impacted my MS. This picture, this next slide that I'm showing you, in the first picture has me and my 6 siblings. As you can see, we tend to be a little on the large side. I'm the only one in the family still living who is under 200 pounds. And a lot of that has to do, I think, with our diet and lifestyle growing up on a large dairy farm in upstate New York. We ate huge meals. We had lots of desserts in the house at all times, and that became a habit for people. I will talk a little bit about that lifestyle change for me and how it impacted. But genetically, going back 2 and 3 generations, we can see that the family had that propensity towards obesity and type 2 diabetes and thyroid conditions and hypertension. So genetically, we are predisposed to that. But I think, given my experience and given how I'll talk to you about that, you can see that our genetics don't necessarily lock us into the development of or worsening of these conditions. The next picture is me about 2002. So we're looking at 18 years ago, and this was how I presented to people when I went out in public. I was not walking more than about 25 to 50 feet at the most on my own, and that was only with an arm to lean on or 2 canes to get by. So you're seeing the genetic predisposition to a lot of other, what we call comorbidities or other health issues in addition to MS, and also to where I was 18 years ago mobility-wise. Now, I do want to say that in that picture of my siblings, we have 5 of us who are diabetic, 7 of us who are hypertensive. All 7 of us are technically obese. So let's move on from there and just give you an idea of some of the changes I made. One of the things that we now know is that sugar is the most inflammation-producing or inflammatory product we can put into our bodies. Anything that does not naturally occur in foods. So our fruits and some of our vegetables have natural sugars in them, and those are not the things that we're talking about as being inflammation-causing. Inflammation causes pain, it causes spasticity, it increases our fatigue, it messes with our cognition, and I think anything that we can do to minimize that inflammation is going to give us a leg up on improving the way that we feel and the way that we are able to manage our MS. So one of the things over the years that we've found as we look at foods is that it's kind of counterproductive for us to be pulling stuff off the shelves or out of the freezer that are prepackaged, pre-made meals, because almost all of them have preservatives, dyes, added sugars, added salt, things like that that can contribute to inflammation and to a ramping up of our symptoms. So if we're able to prepare our foods from fresh, whole foods without adding a lot of extra stuff to them, spices, seasonings are fine. Things like MSG, monosodium glutamate, is a common additive to many of the seasonings that we buy that could be multi-purpose seasonings. It's a flavor enhancer, and it also is something to which many of us are sensitive. When I was younger, MSG used to create migraines in me. So read the labels. Things like salt, pepper, your basil, your oregano, garlic, onions, things like that are going to be fine. They're going to be wonderful flavor enhancers. And you'll be surprised once you start preparing things from scratch how delicious they are and how really they do satisfy and meet your needs for oral pleasure and for not feeling hungry anymore. I did find that with reducing the sugars, I not only had more energy, I was also sleeping better, my pain ramped down, and I can't say that I started losing weight by doing that, but I certainly felt better to the point where I was able to move more purposely, and that helped with the energy level. Exercise is something that we now know really helps everyone with MS to whatever the degree they can move. The first picture that you see here, the people exercising jointly in a gym, is not for some of us. I personally do not like to exercise in large groups of people because I'm a klutz. When they're going left, I'm going right. I do have a definite propensity towards dyslexia, and so my left is your right, and it just doesn't work for me doing synchronized exercise programs. However, also with that large group of exercise, people in a gym or on the floor or on a mat, I personally am very heat intolerant, so my MS symptoms tend to ramp up when I get overstimulated or exercising in that environment. So I personally have found that working in the water is very helpful. Stretching, as you're seeing in that second picture with me in the water, is extremely helpful in reducing spasticity and any pain and discomfort that can cause. It's also very helpful in balance and in preventing falls. So I just think that if we're exercising in the water, keeping cool, that can be very helpful for us. Sometimes if we're getting into the pool at, say, the Y, or a local community pool, we might find that the water is a little bit too warm, particularly if they're doing arthritis classes in the water. That water is generally at 94, 95 degrees because the warmth really helps joints that are arthritic. But it can work against us if we have MS. So we need to find out what our tolerances are with water temperature. I've been told by many people that people with MS should exercise in water that is 80 to 85 degrees. I don't know where they came up with that figure, but for me, water that cool has me getting spasticity worsened. I tend to chill with that temperature of water. So I work best in the wintertime, at least, in water that's between 88 and 90 degrees. In the summertime, definitely cooler water is helpful, and I can do 85-degree water in the summer and work quite efficiently in that. So I just encourage you to try out different temperatures and see what works best for you personally, because each of us is different in our tolerance to heat and our tolerance to activity. I think one of the things that can knock us out of the arena of getting help is a mindset that I've tried this before and it hasn't worked. Or after I exercise, I'm just wiped out for the rest of the day and I don't do well the next day. If that's the case for you, then you're not doing the right exercise, because you can easily do simple stretching exercises. There are all sorts of resources for diagrams and discussion of the types of exercises that can work for you, and find out what feels good. When I first got into the pool and started working, there weren't any really good programs available. There are now. I just started moving and listening to what my body said to me, feeling what felt like it could help, feeling what was uncomfortable, and avoiding those movements. Again, it's a matter of getting to know your body under these circumstances and listening to what it's telling you. So exercise is important, even if you're wheelchair bound and not walking at all. Just flexing your toes, walking in place, stretching from your waist, doing curls with a soup can. Those sorts of things are all very helpful, and as you get them working for you, as you do them regularly every single day, you will find that you have a greater tolerance for that, and you'll be able to work beyond where you started. And I think somebody asked me, after I'd started working in the water, I developed a program called Rehab My Way, because my way was listening to things that worked for me. And somebody asked me where they could find what I had written about that, and I went back and looked at it and read it through and realized, boy, this is not where I started at all. I'm not doing any of these things at all, because I had moved to an exercise program and not a rehab program. So I wrote down what I was doing at that point, where I was getting more active, more intentional exercise than just rehabilitation. I can certainly pass on the exercises that I was doing to anybody who writes in and asks for them. I can leave those with the Multiple Sclerosis Foundation so that they can pass them on to you if anybody's interested. However, the MS Association of America has a wonderful water program that they have a booklet printed for, and you can just write to them and they will be happy to send you that booklet free of charge. So exercise is just as important as what you put in your mouth. And let's move on to the next category, stay on your meds. Easily half of those who are listening to my voice have decided for one reason or another to go off of medication. Perhaps they didn't like the side effects. Perhaps you didn't like the fact that you weren't necessarily feeling like your medication was curing your MS and making it better. Our medications need lifestyle changes to work optimally, to be the best for us that they can be. We need to be doing things like exercising and watching what we put into our mouths in order for our medications to work better. Currently, there is no cure for MS. So these medications do not cure your MS. What they do is they help to keep it from getting worse. The course of MS is such that we may have damage going on that we're not even aware of. And that's why the medications are so important to stay on and to be compliant with and to take them regularly, whether it's a twice-a-day pill, a daily pill, injections several times a week or a couple of times a month, infusions on a monthly basis or 2 to 4 times a year. All of those things go into the whole program to help us to manage our MS better and therefore to feel better overall. I found initially that I told you I could not qualify for a medication when I was first diagnosed at the age of 42. When I was 50, I changed doctors to an MS treatment center. And the neurologist there said that in clear conscience, he could not let me go without a medication, even though it looked at that point like I was secondary progressive MS. I was not freely ambulatory, although I could walk a few steps. I was legally blind. I was pretty much becoming a hermit. I wasn't getting out of my house because I was scooter dependent and couldn't drive. So I had to get somebody to drive my vehicle with the lift on the back that could carry my scooter. And that was, in my mind, a little harder to do than to just stay at home and not ask for help. So that was leading to a sense of isolation and a sense of depression. The first medication that I got on seemed to slow down the disease progress after a couple of months. I didn't feel like my symptoms were quite as intense as they were. A year and a half later, I went to a program done by the MS Foundation, and I was hearing the necessity to be on a medication that was very effective, a higher dose, a greater frequency. This was at a time when we only had 4 medications available to us, where we now have about 20. And so I went back to my doctor and I said to him that I was really thinking about changing my medication. And he asked me what I was thinking of changing to, and I told him, and he told me he didn't think I would like that medication because of the side effects. And I asked him, like what? Now, at that time, all of our medications were by injection, and his response was, well, injection site reaction. And I said to him, well, I'm a nurse, and I teach people how to manage injection site reaction, so I can't see that that's going to be a problem, and I've been on an injectable for a year and a half already with no real problems with that. And he said, well, the side effects. And I said, like what? And he said, flu-like symptoms, achiness, fatigue. And I said, well, the medication that I'm on right now is supposed to have those side effects, and I'm not really experiencing them, so I don't see that as a problem. And I'm a nurse, so I teach people how to manage those things. And then I began to think, well, let's look at it from the perspective of the individual living with MS. And so I said to him, what do you think the side effects of MS are? And he looked a little confused, and he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, they're different for all of us, but for me, the side effects of my MS are that because of my difficulty getting around on my own and needing help, I tend to be isolated, and that causes a mood decrease. I tend to be really depressed a lot of the time. I don't sleep well because of my spasticity and my pain. I don't see well enough to drive. I have to stay near a bathroom because I have to catheterize several times a day. So those are the side effects of my MS, and somehow I don't think that an injection site reaction or potentially flu-like symptoms, which can be managed, are anywhere near as severe as the side effects of my MS. So I want you for a minute to just put away your concerns about the side effects of these drugs and think for a moment about what the side effects of your individual MS are. And think about how your life might look differently if the side effects of your MS were properly managed with medication. And I want you to take that with you to your next doctor's appointment. I mentioned when I was talking about exercise that heat is a real problem for me, especially in the warmer months of the year. I live in the far northeast, so it's a little cooler than it is in the central part of the country or the southern part of the country, and yet I really need a cooling vest to get outside when the temperature is much over 70 degrees, or I can't be outside for more than a few minutes at a time. The MS Foundation runs a cooling program every year from February 1st to June 1st. There is an application right now in your MS Focus magazine or online at msfocus.org. Feel free to write in, fill out that application, give proof by a doctor's signature that you have multiple sclerosis, and the program will supply you with cooling items if you have trouble being in the heat and functioning at top speed in the heat during the warmer weathers. Depending upon the part of the country you live in, one product might work better for you than another product. I find where I live, the humidity tends to be relatively high. So the evaporative cooling systems, those that you wet and put on you and they cool you as the water that's in them evaporates, tend not to work as well because it is so humid. So for my part of the country and for the severity of my heat intolerance, a cooling vest or scarf or hat with a frozen insert works better to keep me cool. There are people at the foundation office who will be happy to talk to you about the climate in your area and recommend a product if you're not sure where to begin. But do take advantage of this, and sooner rather than later, because by the time June 1st rolls around, usually we've had enough applicants that the funding has dried up and we may not be able to go fully till June 1st. So if you think you're going to be needing these things, go online to msfocus.org and fill out that application online and get started getting your own cooling programs. Tending your spirit is very important, and I think it's something that many of us just tend to overlook or let go. Our lives are so busy that we tend not to take time for ourselves, and yet I've found that if I give myself even 5 minutes at the start of the day to just look at what it is I might want to focus on that day. Take some time, close your eyes, and let your body tell you if there's an area that is keeping you from fully focusing on the moment. Is there an area of discomfort? Take note of it, but don't dwell on it until after your couple of minutes of self-assessment is done. Take some time if you have something to read that focuses you on a positive note for the day. There are many things out there that have like minute meditations. They don't have to be religious. They can be motivational. And, find something that speaks to you and use it every single day to focus yourself. Take time to do some yoga or relaxation exercises, or some guided meditation, or some guided imagery. There are a lot of things out there, and again, the MS Foundation, MS Focus, does have materials that can help you on this journey. So don't hesitate to ask about what we have that we can share with you to make your day a little easier. Sleep is absolutely essential. More than half of us with MS are likely to have some sort of a sleep problem, whether it's insomnia, we can't turn our brain off, or we've got areas of discomfort that don't bother us so much when we're awake and active and distracted, but the minute we lay down in bed in a quiet, dark room, all of a sudden they jump into clear focus, and they take our mind off of relaxing and getting to sleep. Many of us also have something called obstructive sleep apnea, which may cause us to stop breathing during our sleep. That has a tendency to take us out of a deeper sleep, bring us back to a lighter sleep quality, so we're not getting that solid, deep sleep that we need to wake refreshed in the morning. If you do have a sleeping problem, please share that with your doctor, whether it be your primary care doctor or your neurologist. Both are very capable of getting you tested if tests are needed to determine what type of sleep problem you have and to help you to learn to deal with it. I personally have gone the route of treating my sleep disorder with heavy-duty medications over the years for decades at a time. I'm happy to tell you that I am now off of all prescription medication after more than 20 years of taking them every single day. And I'm using things like meditation, things like exercise and relaxation exercises, and guided imagery to help me get to sleep at night. And I'm actually getting 6 to 8 good hours of sleep every single night since I've gotten off of those medications. And the quality of that sleep is so much better, and I wake so much more rested in the morning. So I would encourage you, if you're not sleeping well, if you're waking multiple times during the night, to sort of pinpoint what the problems are that are not allowing you to get the best sleep possible and get them addressed. The baby in this picture is my own baby, who's now 42. So watching a sleeping child is certainly helpful to each of us to picture how we can best get to sleep. And I would recommend that you focus on that if you're having some sleep issues. Smoking is something that has been found across the board to be detrimental to our health, even more so if we have a chronic health condition like multiple sclerosis. People who have MS and smoke, or who have MS and live with smokers, tend to progress far more rapidly in the disease process than those of us who live in smoke-free environments and do not smoke ourselves. There's all kinds of literature and studies out there to back that up. This is not just a theory. It's not somebody's soapbox. This is proven to be harmful to you. There's all kinds of ways out there to help people kick the habit. It is not an easy habit to kick. It's probably just as hard as getting off of his long-term opioid addiction, but it is doable. So I encourage you to focus on that if that's a problem with you. If you do not smoke but you live with smokers, talk to them about the fact that even the tars and smoke residue that's on their clothing, on their skin, is harmful to you. If they truly love you, if they're truly concerned about this, they will make a concerted effort, I know, to not harm you further by smoking around you. And many people just don't look at this simple factor as being a factor in the severity of their MS. So please do address this if it applies to you. helping others is very important. It gives us a sense of purpose. This individual is, Ruth has a sister named Dorothy, and they often come on our MS Focus cruises, particularly when we first started doing them back in the early 2000s. Ruth rides a scooter. Dorothy uses Canadian crutches. Dorothy obviously can't get herself a deck chair because it would upset her balance. She would be at a fall risk if she got a deck chair. So Ruth, on her scooter, is able to do that. I don't care how impacted each of us is by our MS. There's always something I can do or you can do to help somebody else that they may not be able to do. We may be the only smile that an individual sees that day. We may be the only voice that individual hears over the telephone. We may be the only communication that they get via messenger or email. We may be the only Skype call or face that they see. No matter how severely we might feel that MS has us in its grip, we are better off than another person in a similar circumstance. And it's incumbent upon each of us to focus on our strengths rather than our weaknesses, and to share those strengths with the broader community. It makes a huge difference in the way we feel about ourselves. I found this little picture on Pinterest a few months ago, and I thought it really spoke well to this whole lifestyle change thing. Your diet is not only what you eat. It's what you watch, what you listen to, what you read, the people you hang around. Be mindful of the things that you put into your body emotionally, spiritually, and physically. Now, I want to take a couple of slides, a couple of minutes to just sort of give you some tips that I've found to be helpful to help us be visible to those of us that take care of us in the healthcare arena. You know yourself better than anybody else does, so introduce yourself to your healthcare team. Let them know about your lifestyle, your preferences for care. Are there unpleasant side effects to your medications? If so, share that. Something as simple as adding an extra glass of water every day can minimize some of the side effects from our medications, whether they're oral or whether they're injectable medication. Infusions, if we add an extra glass or two of water on the days that we get our infusions, they help a couple of different things. They help to remove any toxins from our system that might be triggered by the infusion of the drug. They also help to keep us well hydrated so that we're able to flush anything out of our system via our elimination, and that helps us to feel better. If you're getting an IV for an infusion, that extra glass of water helps to make your veins easier to access. The more dehydrated you are, sometimes the more sticks it takes to get the IV in. So that's very helpful. Depending upon the medication you're taking, there may be other things that you can do to minimize side effects that are unpleasant. So be sure to share those side effects and see if there aren't some tweaks that can be done. Those of us that have MS rarely have only MS. We often, as I mentioned in that first slide, have other things going on, such as high blood pressure, diabetes, hypertension, thyroid disease, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, also known as emphysema. So there may be a number of different doctors seeing us. There may be not talking to each other, even though we have an electronic health record. Many of them don't communicate with each other. So one doctor may not know that another doctor has you taking medicines in the middle of the night when you get up to go to the bathroom so that they're taken on an empty stomach. or holding off getting breakfast into your system so that you're taking it on an empty stomach, or taking medication with food, or taking medication an hour or 2 hours after a meal. You may have 5 different doctors taking care of you, and none of the 5 knows what the other is prescribing or how often they have to be taken. So the plan of care can be really burdensome for you as an individual trying to do what you've been asked to do. So talk to your doctor if it is burdensome. If you're finding a hard time remembering to take things when you are told you need to take them, talk it out with the doctor or nurse in the office and see if they can't come up with some ways that you can combine some of these things to make the plan of care easier. Many of our medications have products in them that may be things that we've eliminated from our diets. For the most part now, they're taking anything that is animal product related out of medications, with the possible exception of things like some vaccines, which are cultured oftentimes in eggs. If you're vegan, if you're vegetarian, those are things that you need to talk to your doctor or pharmacist about to see if there's an alternative, if those things are involved, if there's something alternative that you can take that is easy to manage with your restrictions. I personally am lactose intolerant, and besides being gluten sensitive, I also have a sensitivity to corn. Now, cornstarch and lactose are regular fillers in many of our generic medications. So your pharmacist needs to know if those are problems so that they can know to substitute something that doesn't have that in it as a medication. Let your doctor know if you've got specific goals. It may be that they're trying to rehab you and get you back to walking when you've been in a wheelchair for years, and your goal is to stay more cognitively intact and be able to work well from your chair and keep your mind active. Make sure you're on the same page as far as your goals are concerned. When you go into the doctor, give it some thought before you go to that appointment. Make certain that you've identified things that need to be talked about at that visit. Try to go in there with no more than 2 or 3 major concerns to your appointment, and no more than 2 or 3 questions about those concerns, because you just don't have enough time with your doctor or your nurse practitioner or PA to really let you talk and tell your story. This is the time to be bulleted, to outline everything. Write it all down on no more than 1 sheet of paper. Make sure your medications are up to date. Any supplements that you're taking are listed. One of the things I've started doing and started asking people to do is something that we don't often think about. If we're having a glass of wine or beer with dinner, or if we're having alcohol to help us sleep at night, that needs to be on our medication sheet. And we need to be frank and honest about the amount that we're actually consuming. Measure it if need be, so that you're saying, I drink 5 to 10 ounces of wine, or I drink 1 12-ounce can of beer before bed to help me sleep. Let them know exactly what you're taking, because oftentimes the alcohol that you're adding makes some of your other medications inactive, or it can actually do what we call potentiate those medications. It adds to the potential of those medications, so it may have a greater impact on you if alcohol's added. So be sure that things like that, things like the multivitamin that you may be taking, are all on that sheet when you go to the doctor. You can also be visible by making your voice heard. iConquer MS is a patient-powered research network. It consists currently of about 6,000 individuals who either have MS or live with someone with MS. We share information through online surveys every 6 months, as well as occasional special interest surveys like what do we do nutritionally? What do we do as far as supplements? What are we doing for exercise? What alternative and complementary therapies have we found to be helpful for us? Does acupuncture work? Does massage work? Does chiropractic work? And in so doing, we're gathering information that has not been gathered by the MS community or those that treat us ever. And we're getting a lot of what we call anecdotal evidence. People share what works for them, but it's not housed in any central location that helps to inform us of what really works for a large number of people. So if you're interested in helping add to that information network, go to iconquerms.org, sign up, start taking those surveys and adding your voice to the information that's being gathered and being visible in that way. My dad was a dairy farmer, and his passion after he moved off the farm was fine furniture construction. Mother was a writer all of her life. From the time she was a child, she wrote poetry. And one day, Mom was in cleaning up some of the scraps in Dad's woodworking shop where he built tables and lamps and cabinetry, beautiful work from maple. This was a piece of maple that you see on the screen from our woods at the farm. He would cut off pieces that were damaged. This little piece of wood that you're seeing on the screen was about 6 inches by 8 inches and maybe 3/4 of an inch thick. It was maple, and there was a big knot in the wood, which you see off to the right-hand side of the picture. That knot was deep through the wood and very, very visible both to the eye and to the hand going across it. Mother saw turmoil in it and highlighted it with watercolor and wrote this poem about what she saw. Like this old wood, my life shows stain of creeping flaws within the grain. Yet the crimson thousand possibilities and brings forth beauty from disease. Like this old wood, beneath love's hand, I am transformed in ways not planned. Now, one woman said to me after hearing this, she came up to me after a program where I shared this, and she said, it's all well and good for you to say, beneath love's hand, I'm transformed, because you've got people that love you. I have no one. My husband left me after I was diagnosed. I've had 2 long-term boyfriends since then. They both left. My children don't even call me anymore. No one picks me up to take me to run errands or to take me to church or do anything. And I realized as she was talking to me that there was a lot of anger inside. And it didn't appear that she saw anything about herself that was lovable. Love does not need to come from without. In fact, if you can't find something within you to love, it's harder to find someone to love you. So your assignment when you stop watching this webinar is to sit and focus on you. What are you bringing to the table? What are your gifts? What drives you? What are you passionate about? What can you do? What can you give to make life better for someone else? And once you've identified that lovable aspect or aspects of you, nurture them, help them to grow. And I think you'll be surprised by what a considerable gift you have within you to give to the rest of this world. Now, go find something to be lovable and to love. And thank you very, very much. Please send your questions in the chat box, and we will do our best to answer them for you.
Thank you so much, Cherie, for that presentation. We really appreciate all of the hard work that you put into it and the honesty and vulnerability that you showed in sharing your story. Thank you for being visible for the MS community. We'd also like to thank our sponsors for this presentation and thank everyone who listened for their time and attention. If you have questions or would like to get in contact to talk more about these topics, you can reach us at support@msfocus.org or use the contact page on msfocus.org.